we might be going into another lockdown soon.
Yeah, we are in another lockdown, so
How's that?
that's fun. Well, I think it's more problematic for us because, so once again, so every time we go into lockdown, we're not allowed to drink. Like, we lose, like, all our liquor stores get locked up, and because it's, and I think I've said this to you before, so, I mean, Yazuma, who's, like, essentially head of the task force that decides lockdowns and such, her family runs the black market alcohol sales.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, works out perfect for her because everyone still buys alcohol. They just do it on the black market now.
How convenient.
So I personally don't take these things. I don't take them seriously. Because I know it's not about anything other than. But yeah, I think that's been I know. Well, I mean, even you guys on your lockdown, like, I think it's a good idea. I do think it has to be done. I just think it has to be done with less agendas.
100%. Well, I think. More than less agendas, like, I'd love to just see some consistency with our policies. Like, it's hard to have anyone get behind what you're saying if you're telling them that this is how we fix this, and then also not being consistent with how you do it. Like, everybody stay indoors because of how easily this thing will transmit. Unless you want to go to the mall, then you can go to the mall whenever you want.
But and that's something that I used to. Do you remember? I know I shouldn't be taking my information from South Park, but do you remember the South Park episode? Oh, I went down. But South Park once did an episode where they were talking about war and like, there was this big fight in the town between war and not going to war, like peace, and like when they sang that song, like,
hey, I'm a little bit country and I'm a little bit rock and roll. And
then the speech at the end says the reason America works is because they're both the best country and the worst country at the world at the same time. At both times, like, they appease both people by not appeasing either.
Yeah, like, it's the illusion of, like, everybody, like, someone has your interest at heart.
Yeah, and it's not real.
Yeah.
Like, not to be negative, but, like, you're aware that, like, even when it comes to these political decisions, like, doesn't matter who's making them, whether it's Biden or Trump, like, their agenda is never the people. It's always something else. It's always for either more political gain, or it's for money, or it's for, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's also something that I really struggle with, dude, because, like, if people would take a second just to consider the circumstances for what they are, like, left or right, good or bad, morally, like, whatever you want to label it, like, the same people have been leading the country for at least the last 50 years. Like, that hasn't changed, you know? And so...
I mean, what's that company that writes all your legislation for you?
Goldman Sachs?
No, there's another one. There's a company that writes America's legislation for, like, all these. So you'd have and this company, it's called SAM or something, company that writes legislation for politicians. And then essentially they bankroll these politicians who are pushing this legislation. That are pushing the legislation. Now, it's completely legal, but the people who own this company is their own, like, Coca-Cola, their own the American, like, arms or, like, gun association. They own like, you know, the people that build all the prisons. Like, so it's all these really rich, like, companies writing legislation, and that's the way you get into power. You don't get into power because you have great thoughts. You actually get into power because you're willing to work for these companies that want certain legislations. And then you can say to yourself things like, oh yeah, but I'm only doing it in the meantime because when I get to the top, I'm going to really make a difference. And then you get people like Joe Biden, promised to make a difference since, like, for what, 50 years, 40 years,
47 years, yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, it's quite horrible.
But it's just frustrating because it feels like no one thinks for themselves. They were marketing Joe Biden as honest Joe Biden this time around. They literally took someone who had, like, previously ran for president and had to drop out because they were caught in a pretty significant lie, and then they marketed him to the American people this time around as, like, an honest man who's here for the people.
Honest Joe.
And nobody's, like, taking a second to be like, hold on.
Hilariously, that goes exactly back to the conversation we had yesterday.
Yeah, like, I'm not trying to tell anybody what to think. Like, believe your own political leanings or whatever, but at least consider.
Yeah, I 100%. I get what you're saying. There's this. I think there's a collective apathy to the extent where it kind of feels like no one cares. Like, they've become so distraught.
I think for me also, like, a frustration is, like, again, like, I sound like a broken record at this point, but, like, just, like, I would have much less hesitation in agreeing with someone if they were willing to be intellectually consistent with what they're saying and about who they're saying it to. Like,
yeah,
I will agree with you on your criticisms of capitalism or Republican president or whatever, if you can also just, let's talk about the fact that it's all fucked up. Like, there's no good guy or bad guy here. It's the lesser of both evils. And I think what we end up doing in American politics, instead of picking what we agree with, is we pick whatever party has more in line with our values, despite what the rest of the values happen to be. We'll just choose that.
Yeah.
Which is,
well, I mean, literally, I think that's my biggest issue with Christian voters in the States, because they're all
I went down.
I'm coming. Because they're all what do you call it? One issue voters. They're not voting for Trump. They're voting for the fact that they think he's against abortions. You know what I mean?
which is crazy.
I'm hoping that there's at least some semblance of morality for the sake of the decisions that you're going to make, because your morality is going to play into.
But as long as I live my life as the most comfortably as possible, right? And like, yeah, there's a certain degree of like moral expectation there. Be an effective leader so that I don't have to deal with shit that I'm literally paying your salary to deal with. Don't put corporate interests over my own. Don't let your friends pay you off so that and it has like a tax implication on me and my just leave me the fuck alone and run the country. And like don't throw shit away. It's interesting because like Joe Rogan has a stand-up bit too where he's like, if Thomas Jefferson came to America today, if we could like transport him to the future, the first thing he would say is, wait a minute, you guys didn't write any new shit?
Yeah, 100%.
We wrote that document with feathers under candlelight. What the fuck you mean you didn't write any new shit?
And more specifically, they also wrote that keeping into account their current socioeconomical standpoint, which has changed drastically. Like, there is no way that the socioeconomic standpoint of America at its founding is not compatible with today's capitalistic society. It's not congruent with the amount of people, like the sheer amounts of people, the sheer amounts of cultures. Like America, those guys did not assume or expect America to become even at all what it is today. Like, and you can't tell me that they did. Like, nobody could foresee what America had become. You know what I mean?
People didn't even have a grasp on how big the world itself actually was, let alone to the country of America relative to who they were in importance. Like, they didn't know that shit.
Okay, some people were still arguing that the world was flat at that point.
Well, I know
they're doing that again, but
at least one thing stayed the same. But yeah, dude, like it's just crazy because like these are systems that on their surface, like if I were to name the principle just without telling you that it's like the Declaration of Independence or the Bill of Rights or whatever,
I went down.
People would be like, "Oh, that sounds fucking stupid." But then I put some prestigious label on it, and for whatever reason, like it should guide in our life. That's crazy.
My big, and this is the big thing I've been. Oh, perfect. My big struggle lately also came out of that whole Hannah Arendt thing, which is frustrating because late last year I had come to the kind of conclusion that there's no point in having certain arguments or conversations with people. You're not going to gain anything from it because people need to want to be open for things. The big changes often stem out of our need for a change or our searching for a change. That's why you see these things. But then Hannah Arendt says that we have to turn back to the Socratic way of doing things, where Socrates was always in amongst the people of Athens, and there's always these memes about it. He'd just walk up to people and he'd ask these questions, and he'd start these huge philosophical debates with people who are literal poop scoopers. He didn't care what they were doing, but he believed that philosophy, psychology, politics and everything needed to be outworked amongst the people. And the truth is that is kind of our burden now as well. But there's this balance between not saying something because someone's not going to listen, and how do you have a good, healthy conversation with somebody who has a very narrow perspective.
Yeah.
And that's difficult to me. And I always use it there's a few people in South Africa who they are hardcore Trump supporters. And for that, I have nothing against that. I have nothing against you being a Trump supporter, but they always happen to choose the worst reasons for that fall through the mat. And that's what I have a problem with. I don't care if you're a Trump supporter, but I do care if you're a Trump supporter because you're saying he's Christian. But my point, to my original point was, it's often so difficult to have a conversation with somebody who you full well know isn't going to hear you out because they've got their heels planted in their ideology so firmly. And that's what I was like, that's kind of what I was saying. I'm like, that's why I'm kind of scared, because now Hannah Arendt suggests, hey, we should be the politicians we should be the people in the streets. We should be the people who are not forcing but pushing like great thoughts into the people. But how do you push great thoughts for people who don't want to hear anything?
Hey, Warren.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Nick, to answer your question, I think, why is it that people don't want to hear new information is the question I ask. It's not that they don't want to. My question is why are they so afraid of new information? And I think it's because everything is like so fucking scary and end of the world all the time. Like, it's not enough to say that the other person's like,
Because you can never have your guard down, because the world's always ending.
Yeah, it's not enough to say that like the person on the opposite political party is wrong. You have to also call him a rapist, or like say that he eats children, or like go to the ultimate extreme of labeling that as the most evil depiction of humanity to ensure that everybody doesn't vote for them. You know what I mean? But in reality,
it's funny that you say that, because one of my favorite movie reviewers, I think you turned me on to him, Kyle. His name is Chris Stuckman.
Oh, I love Chris Stuckman.
He does this thing called the Hilariosities and stuff. He made a statement the other day where he said he absolutely never speaks in hyperbole when he does a review, because he doesn't believe in it.
Yeah.
Like, because he thinks that everything's become so like so dull because everyone speaks in absolute hyperbole, and that words don't mean anything anymore.
So it's like, it's not enough to say Donald Trump is wrong with the conservative policies. You have to say Donald Trump hates black people, or like.
Which brings me to my question that I want to talk about.
Oh, here we go.
What's up? Well, look at that segue, Warren.
Hey.
Anyways, so my question is just randomly thinking, and again, this might be completely ignorant or whatever, like South African living in a third world country, not really knowing much about American politics. But here's my thought, okay? So Donald Trump is being banned from virtually every mode of social media. He's being like completely ostracized from the half of America.
Yeah.
And put down in such a way, like he's being labeled now as the worst president ever, the biggest embarrassment to America. I mean, you guys have seen that. Now, here's my question that I want to get to that I find kind of interesting. So, what would prevent Donald Trump, knowing all of the American military secrets and whatnot, and everything that goes down that no one knows, and go to Russia to his buddy Putin, kind of like stage, I don't know if the word is a coup against the American people and whatnot. I don't know if that question even makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
I know it's like a bunch of diehard crap, but I mean, I'm just saying, like, you see it in the movies, it has to be true.
First of all, that's not a dumb question, because
Kyle, you go.
I don't think anything is preventing him from doing that, right? Like, I guess he could, but 100%, like they would kill him in the spot. Like, I think that what we see as political and social power is not even close. I think
I was about to that would have been my comment as well. I think you give him way more credit than he deserves. I don't think he's the person that was really running the show at all.
Yeah, and I also don't think like Russia,
I'm down now.
Like Russia versus America as a feud, like I don't think it's actually a thing. All of these things I think are just distractions to keep people not focused on the immediate problem. And the immediate problem in front of everybody all around the world is the drastic and severe injustices and how we live our lives.
I think there's a lot of safeguards to withhold that as a whole in any president. Like, even Nancy Pelosi made the statement where she said that there are so many steps between him and launching nukes.
Yeah.
It's not just, hey, Donald Trump launches nukes. There are multiple steps, and unfortunately, for anyone, it actually doesn't just work that way.
Yeah.
Like, it's very movie-like, and I think it's the same concept with him being able to kind of take that information to the world. I don't think he has the ability to just go to any country and do the following.
You mean ability as a person, or ability as there's too many like loopholes?
I think he doesn't know. I think there's so much information that he doesn't have.
I'm down.
Comment.
Like I think that there's so much that Donald Trump does. I think he's privy to a lot of information, of course.
Yeah.
But do I think that he knows the secrets that could crash the world? No, of course not.
No, dude. No way.
No, man. Like I honestly, and I know this is going to sound very like conspiracy theory of me, but I do think there are groups of people who kind of navigate the information, and I think it's privately owned.
Oh, 100%.
Like the Illuminati.
I hate saying the Illuminati. I hate it, but yes, like.
Well, or I mean, in every other series, they call it the company. Like everybody talks about, oh, the company. But in most places, the company isn't really a bad place. Like it's just New World Order, man.
It's just perceived sense of security, right? Like if you dangle this system in front of people to make them feel like they have any kind of control, but the truth is, no, they don't. You know, like people don't have a control, they don't have a voice, it doesn't matter. Do you think with all of the information that exists in the world, they would just let people vote for who gets to be in charge of that for potentially the next 4 years? No way, dude.
Yeah.
Like, Americans can barely choose the right contestant on American Idol, let alone the leader of the free world.
That's so true. Oh my gosh.
You know, like,
That's
there's no
very
way. There's no way. And so I think it's just, again, it's this illusion so that people can feel like they have some semblance of control so that they are more okay with the continuing enslavement that we just see ourselves getting.
Nick, Kyle,